The question is that the bill be now read a second time, and I call on the member for Solomon.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy Speaker. I rise today to record my support for the highly anticipated National Disability Insurance Scheme. I've been involved with the disability sector and people with disabilities for many years now, and agree it is now time that the NDIS be implemented. The Gillard Labor government shouldn't be playing lip service or politics with this important issue. It should come clean and explain to Australians how it's going to fund this very, very important scheme. All too often we hear those on the other side make announcements, get the media all hyped up, they use weasel words, they spin around and round, but you can't lock them down. It's time for them to come clean. After all, this is the same government that promised no carbon tax, promised a surplus, and in fact reported through a number of its members' newsletters that they've actually delivered a surplus, which we all know is a blatant misrepresentation of the truth. How can you believe anything this Prime Minister or the government says? Most Australians agree that it's a stark, sad reality that the state of the system of support for Australians with a disability is fundamentally broken, and that it is now time for the NDIS. A number of constituents who have contacted me regarding this issue tell me they think it's time that the Gillard Labor government committed to real funding of the NDIS. The Gillard Labor government hasn't got a good track record of implementation, and this issue is too important to be meddled with or mucked up by the Gillard Labor government and the politics associated with it. They are a desperate government who will do and say anything to stay in power. Now, the Coalition is ready to work together on this issue so that we can get it right. We've made an offer to work with them. To get this right means that a coalition government is absolutely essential. A coalition government is needed to deliver a strong budget surplus and to give certainty to this scheme, which will affect so many Australians with disability and their families. This is the only way a government can guarantee that an NDIS will be sustainable. Territorians want an NDIS. I've spoken on this issue before in this place and shared some of the stories of constituents who have asked me to support the introduction of an NDIS. The NDIS, for those in the area that readily access this scheme, it will help people with a disability participate more fully in economic and social life through the provision of funding for aids, essential equipment, supported accommodation and round-the-clock care. Sadly, we can all agree that most Australians with a disability currently aren't getting the support they need, and that's an absolute disgrace. Whether people have been born with a disability or have acquired it during their life, there is currently no real support system for them. There's nothing really for them to fall back on during their time of need. And in some instances, there are people who can recover the costs of their care due to injury if the injury is through the fault of another or can be covered under an insurance scheme. However, for the overwhelming majority of Australians with a disability, it is a lifelong struggle for them and their carers to find the money to pay for essential care and equipment. It's disappointing that the Labor government hasn't released a proper set of NDIS rules, and that it's very hard to determine who will get assistance and who won't without these guidelines. The Gillard Labor government released a discussion paper on the NDIS rules February the 1st, 2013. It's a fair statement that this paper doesn't shed light on the NDIS rules, not one little bit. This is disappointing for Australians with a disability and their loved ones who are waiting with high expectations of a firm and rigorous eligibility procedure to follow. The aforementioned paper proposed a series of questions, hardly what we would expect of a draft set of rules. What is clear, though, is that the Coalition has supported each milestone on the road to developing an Australian-wide NDIS. We supported the initial findings by the Productivity Commission and have encouraged vehemently the Gillard Labor government to take up our offer of a cross-party committee so that we can ensure that we can get it right. Now, to no surprise, this offer was refused by the Gillard Labor government. We wholly supported the $1 billion in the last budget, and we wholly support this legislation. The Coalition believes that the NDIS can be delivered in the timeframe recommended by the Productivity Commission, but this can only be achieved by a prudent government that manages their finances and delivers a budget surplus when they promise. The Gillard Labor government has now promised to deliver a budget surplus over 500 times, and we're still waiting. My hope is for all Australians with a disability, is that the promise of a fully funded NDIS isn't broken, the same way that the carbon tax promise was broken. The Coalition stands ready to work with the Labor government to achieve their promise and deliver a well overdue NDIS. Additionally, medical defence organisations and individuals with a disability are concerned with the measure that allows the NDIS CEO to make directives that a participant must sue or make claims from insurers when there is a chance that costs could be recovered. Personal injury litigation is an expensive and arduous process, and this can be dangerous, as this could force more costly litigation upon our already litigated society. Insurance premiums will skyrocket, which triggers a flow-on effect to Australians and their ever-increasing cost of living. Our overworked courts will be even more clogged up with unnecessary litigation. As usual, the Gillard Labor government has provided little detail as to how individuals will be assessed, how they'll be eligible, and what kind of disabilities will fall under the scheme, and also what support services will be provided under the scheme. Now, this won't be obvious until the rules and regulations are released, which we don't expect for some time. It'd be useful if we had them now, but however, this is the part of the process that they're choosing to go down. The NDIS is a once-in-a-generation reform that will unfold over several parliaments, and it is important that we work together to get this right. The Leader of the Opposition has shown his personal dedication and commitment to this issue by dedicating $540,000 raised by the 2012 polypedal bike ride to Carers Australia. He's also personally met with Australians with disabilities, their carers, and has listened to numerous numerous disability organisations, as has many of the members on this side. Carers Australia is a fantastic organisation, and the next two polypedal rides have been dedicated to raising funds for the organisation to further assist Australians with a disability. The Gillard Labor government continues to spruik the NDIS as a scheme promoting Labor values and its Labor beliefs, but Australians are sceptical, and they tell me that they don't necessarily believe this is the case. The NDIS supports Australian values and territory values. The NDIS gives Australians with disabilities and their carers a fair go. It will help those who face challenges for reasons beyond their control. The NDIS is designed to empower the individual, to remove government from their everyday life and reduce red tape. Now, the Coalition believes that the full implementation of an NDIS would be nothing short of a new deal for people with disabilities and their carers. We must get this right, and we will get this right with a prudent Coalition government with strong fiscal policies for the future of Australia. As I said, to get this right, it is essential that we have a high level of consultation and a precise attention to detail from now through implementation until we see results that this is working for Australians. The Coalition has always welcomed a cross-party parliamentary committee chaired by both sides of politics to oversee the implementation. One of the biggest health reforms since Medicare, it is fundamental that we get this right. A parliamentary oversight committee would lock in all parties and provide a non-partisan environment where issues of design and eligibility could be worked through cooperatively. While the NDIS will fundamentally help Australians with a disability. It will also provide some form of certainty to the selfless carers that care for their loved ones with a disability. A mother should not have to fear for her adult child's safety when she passes on. A father should not have to worry every day of his life how he will pay his 40-year-old son's specialist bills when he's too old to work. It's important to note that every government in Australia and every opposition in Australia support and wants to see a successful NDIS. This is a very important point because it's not the same for the Gillard Labor government's carbon tax. The Gillard government should accept our offer of a parliamentary oversight committee. This government likes to pay lip service to wanting to have cross-party support for the NDIS, but when the opportunity to do so has presented itself, they've declined to participate. What message does this give Australians? The Coalition wants to give the government, the Greens and the Independents an opportunity to work together on this very, very important issue. We want to offer our hand of cooperation by moving amendments to this bill to establish a non-partisan oversight committee. And the Gillard Labor government should accept this offer to ensure a successful NDIS delivers results to Australians who need it most. This is the right thing to do. It was disappointing at the the last COAG meeting before the Prime Minister could not rise before her partisan instincts and agree to work on this with as much support as she could find. It's to the credit of Premiers Baillieu and O'Farrell that they continued to negotiate in the face of public attack and misrepresentation by the federal Gillard Labor government. But they stood firm until they reached agreements to host launch sites. The Coalition urged the Prime Minister to adopt a more cooperative approach when dealing with our states and territory governments, as there can be no NDIS without their buy-in and without their support. It's now up to the Prime Minister to continue to work with the states and territories to adopt a more constructive approach to reach a more bilateral agreement, hopefully one that will benefit the people of my electorate in Solomon. Whilst the Productivity Commission never envisaged a problem with the absence of launch sites from a few states and territories, territories know that we in the top end are extremely far away from the nearest capital city, and without confirmation from the Gillard Labor government on eligibility tests and how they'll be carried out, I can't be sure that the people in my electorate won't miss out because of Labor's incompetence. The Coalition will continue to place this issue above politics, and as I said, we are prepared to work with the state and Commonwealth governments and the Gillard Labor government towards a better deal for people with disabilities and their carers. In the last federal budget, we fully supported the government's commitment of $1 billion to the NDIS. However, this doesn't add up to the $3.9 billion the Productivity Commission said would be necessary over only the first phase of the NDIS. It's essential that this scheme is fully funded throughout the rollout phase, as this is the first stage will benefit around 20,000 people with disabilities and their families and carers. Australia is the land of opportunity. The NDIS will provide this for many families across Australia as long as it is fully funded to reach its potential. As I've said, the Coalition stands ready to provide strong and stable government. A Coalition government can provide this funding with its plan to deliver a safe, secure Australia within a budget surplus. Thank you, Mr.